What do you see when you look in the mirror? Interesting question. So, what are all those secrets that you're hiding? So, but what am I talking about today? Today, I'm talking about a new book by Nikita Singh. This book is a collection of 15 short stories that are centered around the main subject of confronting one's inner self, embracing it. She explores the secret inner lives of her characters as they grapple with love, loss, grief, and mental health. And it truly forces you to ask the question, how much of the person in the mirror that you see is truly you? Today, I'm very excited to have Nikita Singh with me. She's a best selling author of 13 books, including The Reason Is You, Every Time It Rains, and Like a Love Song. She's also the editor of a collection of short stories, 25 Strokes of Kindness, and The Turning Point. Nikita, a very warm welcome. So excited to have you with us. And you're sitting in a beautiful, beautiful place.
Thank you, Sukriti. Glad to be here.
So,
Really.
I mean, I must ask you this question because you asked this question to your readers. And now we're also wondering how much of the person that you look in the mirror do you truly see as you?
Wow. We're starting with that.
I said, let's get right into it because let's talk about who we are and what we show to the world and maybe even to ourselves, because I think that is the whole, at least for what I understood, that is
Mhm.
the idea that you're trying to explore, that sometimes we
Yeah.
even hide ourselves from ourselves.
Yeah. Um, I would say that I try my best. Um, I think it's really important for me to, when I look in the mirror at the end of the day, to see myself and not somebody else, which I did see for a long time because we're all a product of our circumstances. And I started writing pretty young. So I had voices in my ears from all over the world. Like people were just saying all kinds of things to me. And as much as I consciously tried not to absorb any of that, my subconscious mind did. Like I was at the back of my mind thinking about those things. Uh, and if you're already insecure about something and somebody says something, then it just magnifies it in your mind and it just stays with you for a very long time. So people, with my other books, my previous books, I've been writing for 10 years now, and my writing has been changing underneath the cover for a long time. I wouldn't say that any of my past like 4 or 5 books with HarperCollins has been like you can't call them romance novels, but the covers are kind of like greeting card looking, kind of like it looks palatable to people so that they pick it up. But only the people who read it would realize that it's about uh, there's depth in the love that is written about. It's not oh, it's not Bollywood romance. It's not unrealistic. It's not up on the surface. It's about relationships between different people, your family, your parents, your friends, of course, love stories, and all of those things. So it's about all the feelings that we're feeling. It's not just about romantic love. It's about all kinds of love. Also, society is a big thing that I always talk about, and social media and its impact on people and their own self-worth and how they view themselves. So with this book, I would say that this is me confronting the mirror, because if you the people around me, my friends and my family, know who I am far more than anybody on social media, because I am very private that way. I would share parts of my life, but it would be curated. I wouldn't um I wouldn't be as open as, because I don't need to be. I don't want to be sharing every thought that I ever have in my mind on social media. That's not. I've been fortunate to have a good community around me that I can be open with, but a lot of the times you don't see that in my books. My books are still a little bit safe, a little bit. I don't want anybody to hate it, like that kind of feeling. So but with this book, you would see that there's a lot of stories that I knew that a lot of people would not like. And then some stories that I thought that they might. So it's about the reader then. Like some stories that somebody
I think
might
the ones that
absolutely
hit
love.
you are the ones that you don't like.
Right, right. So like it's it's really not about pleasing anyone. People can either hate it or love it, and it's up to them. but I wanted to be as open as possible. So I was sort of exposing the inner lives of all of these different characters and different fields of their life and different circumstances, and see how they react. So it's pretty much none of the stories look the same, and none of the characters you would think that you 100% want them to succeed. You don't know where you stand, because we are all not black and white. There's so many grays. So I think this book was kind of about exploring the grays.
No, and you said it best, and I think I read this in one of your tweets, that this was one of the hardest books that you have
Mhm.
written. And because human nature is really confusing and it is complicated to understand it, to pen it down. So why did you
Yeah,
find also writing this book so much more difficult? Because you're such a gifted and talented author.
thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't write for a couple of years before I wrote this book, just because I couldn't. I tried, and I've written so many books before that. My first 2 years of being a writer, I published 6 books, and then I kept doing one book a year. I was like, okay, now I have to slow down, limit it to one book a year, and just like focus on my life. Like I wanted to live, not just be at my desk writing all the time. Um, so then I gave myself a break, sort of started writing slowly. But right before this book, I kind of tried to write, but I couldn't. I think maybe because I wasn't ready to face the stuff that I was going to write about, which is still my next book. I still have to work on that. But then eventually, after struggling for a long time, I was like, no, this is too much for me right now. I can't do it. Maybe a collection of stories would be better. I had 4 or 5 ideas. I pitched it to my editor, and they really loved what one of the ideas was the first story, which is, you know, a couple decides pretty young that they want to die together if it was one of their time. And when it's time, one of them isn't ready. So that was one of the first ideas I had. And then slowly I had a few ideas. And then I kind of started seeing a theme about, like people are, what their thoughts are could shock people who claim to know them, because your inner lives are really, nobody can read your mind. Nobody knows what's going on in somebody else's heads. So that became a theme. And I started thinking of more plots. And then this happened slowly.
No,
So it
and it's
was.
very well written because all the stories are very different, because they make you think, right? So they put you in that circumstance of saying, okay, if I was in this, especially the first story, I think
Mhm.
that one, of course, makes you think a lot. What would I do? You know,
Yeah,
I mean, and which way would I go?
right, right. So that story was so fun to write. I've been thinking about it for maybe 3 years at this point. When I wrote it, I had been thinking about it for 2.5 years. I would still, I feel like at the end, I reached an ending that I was just happy with, because it was gonna be sad and happy and all of these things. But the way that we got to the ending was so, there were so many twists and turns. And in the end, I had to, while I was writing, I had to change the ending from what I thought that I was going to write, because I felt so bad for the character that I couldn't have made it worse for him. Uh, but yeah, so many twists. It was so fun to write. So once I had a brief kind of layout of what it would look like, I basically took a big piece of paper, divided it into like these cubes, and then started writing. And anytime I had an idea, I would write it down. And then I started seeing it from a distance and seeing the book form, and then I sat down to write it. So I already knew what was happening everywhere in all the stories. So then the writing process became, because I broke it down and I made it fun, it became really enjoyable to actually write it. Not that I didn't cry. I cry so much when I
No, but that's
write
why
books.
I'm actually glad they're short stories, because I don't
Yeah.
think you could read just like how you read a romance novel or a larger novel, because
Yeah.
each story, I think you have to really sit and really think about it. So it's nice that you can just take one, just read
Mhm.
it, and then come back.
Yeah. Even the arrangement of the stories, I struggled with, because I didn't want all the, heavy stories all together. I wanted to space them out. I wanted there to be a flow. It's almost like when musicians come out with an album. and the way they place music
Yes.
that flows into each other. It was a fun process for me overall, just the structure of this book and the style and placing things together. All the stories have its own unique style in which it's written. They sound like somebody else wrote them. It doesn't sound like me all the time. So it was a fun experiment for me. It was super hard, coming back to the question that you've asked. It was super hard to write because so many feelings, so many emotions to like confront. It was a lot like looking in the mirror. And I think in the end, I could have worked on this book for another year, but I had to let it go. I was like, this, this is,
But it's
I
good to
can't.
understand that from an author's point of view, because when do you finally know that you're done? Like the book is done? Because I think
Yeah.
we're also critical of ourselves. We want to fix and we want to keep
Mhm.
on editing and editing and editing.
Yeah. And it's with a novel, you can go back like 5 times and it still would be not, it wouldn't take that much time because it's one story. It's one story, and how many times, how many things could you want to change? But with this, if it's 15 stories and I keep going back and forth in every story, it would be, first, the book would be super overproduced in that sense. Like everything is too thought out.
Yeah.
Nothing is natural, nothing is flowing. It's all like manipulation almost. So no, I knew when to stop. Also, I got tired. I was like, so much. Okay, this is it. This is it. Let's go.
What are the reactions you're getting? Because I love the reaction your boyfriend had. He asked you, "Are you a psychopath?" What are some of the other reactions that are
Oh,
you
the
getting?
story that he started with was a story that I wrote many years ago, and I pretty much left it unedited here. I changed for clarity in a few places, but other than that, I left it untouched. It was called Anything, and it's such a weird story. It's divided into 14 different, um, let me pull it up, 14 different scenes, and all of the scenes happen in one page, and they're all
Yes.
compact, the way that they're arranged on the page. So 149. So this is the first scene, and it's all here in a
Yes.
chunk.
It's like a diary, like you're reading.
Yeah, and
Yes.
then this and this. So it goes between
This
past
was
and
the one I
present.
think was very disturbing.
Yeah, it was I was disturbed. um, so I was the first piece is about you, and then the second is about I. The you, I, it goes back and forth for the first 10 scenes. And anytime I talk about you, it's from the past. So there's this chain of the story happening in the past, and then we come to the present and what's going on now, and then past, present, and change of perspective. And then at the 10th story, something like this happens because something breaks, something, they're
Yes.
in a limbo, something weird is happening, almost like magical realism, um, and then, or fantasy, supernatural, something weird is happening. And then the last four scenes are also you and I, but it's all written in the future tense. And so it's like, you will feel my faint heartbeat under your palm and all this stuff. And then all the so the page that starts with an I, every single sentence starts with an I, and with the you, every single sentence starts with the
Well,
you.
that one is a very disturbing one. I
Yeah,
must
so
say.
it just puts boundaries on you. And I've talked about this before when I was doing my MFA. Some of my writer friends would tell me that they sometimes try to write a whole story without the letter J or without the letter L, whichever. So then that makes them think of different words. Anytime they want to use a word with that letter, they just have to kind of assume that the keyboard is missing that letter, or that can. So you put restraint in yourself, so then you don't go towards your instinct. You have to go beyond that. And that kind of, you have this huge toolbox, but you reach for the same tools all the time because
It
that's
forces
just
you out
a
of your
force of
comfort
habit.
zone. Yeah.
Right. But then if you limit yourself and like you put some boundaries, then you have to go outside and look at something new. And instead of using the word joy, you're going to think about something else because you can't use J. And then that's outside of your regular habitual vocabulary. So similarly, I wanted to, so then I was reframing every sentence. So start with the you or I. And that in itself, the format was exciting, but just the story was it was
Well, that's
aggressively.
one of the ones that definitely, I mean, it starts off very beautifully. you know?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, then
I was
it
like,
becomes
oh,
a,
sad story about, when they first met and how somebody's sick now, what's gonna happen? And that's why my boyfriend was, because he's read all my other work, and then he knows how I think and what I all through the day, what I'm doing and all that stuff. So he was just like, how did this come out of your mind? Why were you thinking about this? It's so weird for him. I was like, "Oh."
no, which one? I know this is always difficult. Which one was your most favorite one? And which can you read us something from it?
Well,
And do you
definitely from
have
the
a
first.
favorite? Because it would be hard to choose.
I think the Together Forever that I put first was definitely one of my favorites. And then there was Circle, which was chapter 138. Circle was the one where this couple is going to pick up the husband's father from the airport,
Yes.
and
That's a
they're
very
trying to,
sweet one, though.
yeah, they're trying to convince
Him
him
to
to
move
come live
with
with them.
them. Yeah.
it was it was such an interesting concept just for me to imagine, um when kids are younger, a father son relationship, the bond is so strong, and then somewhere in the teenage it kind of breaks because there's a communication gap. And then, not for everyone obviously, but especially in this story it happens that way, that there's a mom so that you're closer, and there's it
She
just like
forms the
buffers the
circle of
communication.
communication. Yeah.
Right. Uh, but then after she passes, how do they rebuild their bond?
But
Because
in this one, I saw that the wife took kind of that role, you
role,
know?
yeah, because it's so hard for two grown men to communicate with each other about emotions and about, it's so hard. It just would, if they could avoid it, they would avoid it at all costs. They wouldn't sit down, and especially in our society in India, it's so difficult to talk about emotions. So, um, yeah, with her there, it becomes easier. And that's what I've seen in my family. Anytime we've had a loss of a close family member, if there are kids around, it becomes easier because everyone's focused on the kids and talking about the kids, and they're laughing and playing. So there's always a buffer that helps you. And I wanted to sort of explore that relationship. So this story was a little bit hard for me to write also.
Please do read us something from it because, and I also want to ask you when you're writing for a global audience, how do
Hmm.
you get the tone and tenor right? Because you're not writing for just one set of audience. You're
Uh, I keep my tone just as organic as possible. It's I don't think for anyone it would be super jarring the way I write, because they wouldn't think that, because the dialogues, I think that the dialogues are what I do the best, and I just focus on how people actually talk and then just write them down. So I don't overthink it. And then I feel like if I'm not trying to sound a certain way, if I'm not trying to please a certain audience, it can become more just fluid and approachable for everyone
Please
that
do
way.
read us something. I think we're dying to now hear this.
Okay, so I'll start reading from Circle. It's not a very long story, but it's like 6, 7 pages. Let's see. Let's see how far we go. Um, how was his wife, even at 9 months pregnant, ready to give birth at any moment now, still stronger than him? It didn't make any sense. Akash wished for some of that strength, keeping both of his hands firmly on the wheel. His eyes stayed on the road, but his ears were tuned in to every breath Mansi took. He was watching for change. Knowing Mansi, she would play down her discomfort, so he took on the responsibility of looking out for her. If her became shorter, even by a fraction, or a moan escaped her lips, he would turn the car towards the hospital. Akash looked in the rearview mirror to ensure, for the 10th time, that the hospital bag packed and ready in the that they had the hospital bag packed and ready in the back seat. Akash, can you relax? You're starting to freak me out. Mansi groaned from the passenger seat. I am relaxed, he said quietly. His wife didn't actually need a response from him. She could read him like an open book. Really? Because it looks like you're choking that steering wheel, and you won't look at me. Akash glanced towards her shortly, before returning his gaze to the road. I'm driving, he said shortly, evenly. Can you at least put one hand on the gear so I can hold it? The baby needs it. Knowing full well that she was using the baby growing inside her to get her way, Akash followed her instructions. Mansi placed her right hand on top of his left and squeezed it. Despite himself, he felt better. Do you want to talk about it? She prodded. There's nothing to. Do you want to talk about it? Mansi asked again, this time her tone making it clear that refusing wasn't an option. It took a moment for Akash to form the words. What he was feeling was very simple, very obvious, but still, somehow, saying it out loud, putting words to his fear, left his body cold. What if he says no?
That's
Mansi's
good.
grip on
Yeah.
his hand grew stronger. She didn't respond, not knowing what to say. So basically, this is the beginning of him going into a flashback of thinking about all the events that have occurred since his mom passed away, and how his relationship with his father has changed, and how he has to make this proposal to his father now, and how much he hopes that he would say yes.
It's a
So,
beautiful story, and you see that transition, because we still have that we want our parents to live with us, but they're very attached actually.
mhm,
And in this one especially, it made me think about how attached old people are, even to their houses, their
mhm,
space, and they're also very reluctant. They're not also keen to also make that move.
right. Yeah, and it's hard on both ends. I have so many friends who keep trying to get their parents here, and then one parent decides to move and the other doesn't, which will never work because they miss each other too much. So then they just keep trying back and forth, and it's really heartbreaking for everyone because the kid has to be in a city or in a place where they have a job and a career and a future, and the parents don't want to be there. So it's it's hard to find a compromise sometimes.
So, what actually makes a good story? Any tips? Because a lot of people want to know, and a lot of aspiring writers are out there. So, what actually makes a good story?
I think people always ask me about a formula, and I think that's the wrong direction. Because if you start thinking about, okay, what are all these elements that I should put in here so that, it'll have all the drama and emotion and also this and some thrill, some mystery, all of that. That just, I don't know, maybe it works for some people, but I think it's the heart. If I think of a story and I have it on my mind for a long time and it refuses to leave, I think of so many ideas and they come and go. But then some ideas just stay longer because I have a connection to them in a way. Like want to. I think it is about the author, and it's then it becomes a personal process. It excites me, so that's why I would do justice to that story. No matter how good a story is, if I don't have any personal um, emotion that comes out from me when I think about it, then I won't be able to deliver it. So I think it is the heart of the story, and the author needs to sort of believe in it. And if at the end of the day, I think that if I like a story, I hope that the readers will. So that's how I write. I don't write thinking about a certain kind of reader and giving them something that they want, because then it's not mine, and I want it. I want to
Oh,
write for me.
nicely said, because I think it's coming from you and it's something that you want to pen down. But everybody wants that formula. Tell me, should I have this intro and how should I do it? Because
Yeah.
we're so used to that 5 point technique these days, those 5 tips on the internet.
Oh, right, right. None of those. I mean, I feel like, okay, so there's an art and a craft aspect of it. And for the craft, of course, if you don't know, if you've never done this before, which is most people haven't written a book, so it's good to know the craft of it. And I think for me, it was never studying how to write, it was just reading a lot of books. Because then in your mind, you form this like syllabus in a way, like, okay, most stories start this way. And why did at the end of the book, you always know if you really loved it, or like you kind of rate it in your mind. And at the end, if you read 100 books in a year, at the end of it, you remember maybe 5 or 10 of them really well. So those are the books, and then those are the books that you retain in your mind, and the formulas or whatever the format and all of those things that you form in your head, the blueprint for your book or your writing comes from those. Because so then it's a more personal and customized craft versus going to ask somebody how to do it. How did you do it? And I'll do the same way, because it won't have the same effect.
No, it's so true. But you've been writing since you were 19, and at 25, you already had 10 books, and at 30, you have 13 books already. So,
Mhm.
how, I mean, because 19 is very, very young, I mean, at least when at least when I look at it. And so, tell us
Yeah.
what shaped it. And a lot of people are still worried because they love writing, but they think and they say, can I really make a career out of it also?
Hmm. I don't know if you need to make a career out of it. Is, you know, like as the first step that you take, you're already worried about, what's going to happen after. What about the next book? And, what about doing it as a profession forever? That's a big responsibility that you're putting on yourself. I think a lot of people want to be a writer, but don't start writing unless you have something to say, because then you're writing just to become a writer, not to tell the story that you want to tell. And then it would show in the work. So I think the only way to do it is to take it one step at a time, because you do one thing. If you really say that you want this as a profession and you love writing so much, what's stopping you from writing? Why are you thinking about what will happen if I write 10 books? Like, a career from it, a profession, all that stuff. That's so far ahead. You do it one step at a time. In any career, you don't become a doctor. You don't think about, oh, how am I going to perform heart surgery? That's 15 years from now. You're not going to do it alone. You're going to do it one step at a time. You're going to first choose biology in 11th and 10th class, 12th class, and then you have to do pre-med, and then you have to go get into med school and then study that, and then internship, like all of that stuff. There are steps to everything. So for you to think, I want to make this a profession and make so much money and fame and all of those things, that's not going to happen on day one. um, but because it has happened for some people, people think it's viable. But that's how it is with art. Most art forms, musicians, actors, writers, any kind of performer, only 1% of them can sustain themselves on their art. There's painters, like how many people can, and so why, the whole point is you say that you want to be a writer because you love writing. So then write. Why is that? You know, why are there so many ifs and buts?
That's a good thing, because I think that's where most people want to see the paycheck before the writing.
Yeah, a lot of people want to be an author before
Yes,
they want to be a writer. So
yes,
that's the
that's the
they
catch.
want to work, they want to see the results.
No, when I was Googling you, so a lot of times I saw this word come up, Mills and Boons, and that's our generation. And when we used to read romance novels, and they, of course, they describe you as a best-selling romance novelist. But a lot
Mhm.
of the millennials, especially these days, when you ask them, do they believe in romance or what is romance? They say, well, we don't believe in this traditional format of love, but this genre is on the rise. Why is that? Because I thought we were done with the Mills and Boons generation, which was us.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I think the definitions have changed, but that doesn't mean that people don't want to be loved and people don't want to believe in companionship or a connection and sharing your life with somebody else that you love. Um, so people do want to read about relationships, and our society is sort of so starved of, because people don't talk about things. People don't talk about love. People don't talk about uh, anything
Even
emotional.
if they talk about it, it's very superficial, I would say.
Yeah,
It's
because it's hard to talk about emotions. It really is. Like try to talk about it with your family, or it is difficult. People have these small pockets, groups of people that they can share with, but otherwise, it's very, people are embarrassed to confront these things. But I think everybody wants to be wanted, and everybody wants to have somebody to rely on, somebody to care for, somebody that cares about them, and all of those things. So then a book feels like a safe space where they can think about feelings and emotions and relationships, and sort of live in someone's story. um, I don't know. I don't really know Mills and Boone, like what's happening with them now, but back in the day I have read their books, and they are all the same format, and it's fun to read for sure. But I think when people say that they don't believe in romance and stuff, I think they mean like the way it was portrayed. It used to be portrayed. It was just, the leading force that would direct you and all of this stuff. And um, I think they mean that they are more realistic about it. It's not the Bollywood romance, like all or nothing, I will die for you, like that kind of stuff. Because it really
Not
isn't
the
like,
big romantic gestures.
yeah, people are more about, individuality and what do I want, who am I, and all of those things. So then finding a partner for themselves and running away from traditionally, oh, you find somebody, you get married, you have kids. So that's what probably they're trying to. I can't speak for everyone, but that's what I see.
No, no, well explained. I think that's really nicely said, because I think we're very perplexed because the older generation, especially a lot of people that I speak to, are talking about their children. It's hard to understand what are they looking for life, because it
Mhm.
was just like, okay, meet somebody, you've met him, go get married.
Yeah.
I think you said it well that it has
Although
changed.
when are you getting married question, oh my God.
It doesn't
It,
stop. When are you having
when we
kids?
were
When are you
younger, I
getting
thought
married?
that it was only the, neighborhood aunties or like distant relatives that were also involved in everyone's life, finding out everything and asking these questions. But people ask me that all the time on social media. And these are all like young people, young guys, usually like 18 to 28 maybe. Like guys are asking me that constantly, when are you getting married? I don't know why. Like
That's
what
maybe
is it?
because they might be interested in you and they're trying to figure out, are you taken or is there
Yeah,
scope?
but the fact that people think that they have the right to inquire, and like they're talking about they're asking questions that they don't want to be asked. Who wants to be asked that? Like anytime somebody in your family, your distant relatives or whoever, extended family, asks you that, you're like, what do you have to do with my life or whatever, leave me alone. But then you're going and asking. So the reason I'm most shocked is that it comes from my generation asking me. And I was like, I thought that we hated that. What?
That's why it's hard to understand. Like I said, sometimes it's very difficult to understand that are
Yeah.
they really traditional? Are they gone? Or are they in kind of that confused
Or
state
a
where
lot
they're
of the time
figuring it
people
out?
can't handle that you're like, you are independent and successful and you're growing older. You should be married by now. You should have kids by now. Like, those questions. It's just so deeply the patriarchy is so deep within us. We can't get
No,
rid
it'll
of it.
take a long, long way. But I love it that you tweet also a lot about what you're watching. So
Mhm.
you talk a lot about that. So we want to know before we leave what's on your playlist and what's on your reading list. Because as you said, to be a good writer, you need to read a lot. And so what are you reading these days? And what are you
I
watching?
with Twitter, my relationship is really erratic.
Interesting.
I would go on and I would just tweet for a few weeks every day, and then I would get off Twitter for months. So I don't know the last time, maybe when my book came out 2 months ago, maybe I tweeted a bunch and then I left. uh, I'm watching Succession right now.
Oh, I like that one.
Oh
Yes.
my God. That
It's
show is
obsessive.
so dark.
It's been binge watch.
Yeah, I'm on season 2. I'm watching, I have like 3 episodes left, so it's getting pretty intense. I'm watching that. I'm also watching Schitt's Creek.
Okay,
Um,
I haven't seen that one.
yeah, that one's funny. I've been watching that one for months. So we get into these zones where we're watching a whole season and then we kind of take a break and then come back. Um, I also am watching Grace and Frankie, but we stopped
Yes, I
because
like Grace and Frankie. They're really nice role models in the sense that, you
yeah,
know what?
it makes you feel good about growing older.
Yeah.
Usually, when you think about getting older, you're a little bit scared, but this one makes you feel, oh, I can't wait. Uh, so that one we stopped for now because they have new episodes coming every week
Yes.
or so. So we're waiting for the whole season to be out so that we can binge it. Reading wise, I'm reading My Dark Vanessa right
Okay.
now. It's Kate Elizabeth Russell. It's right there. So I it's a difficult book to read. That's another a book that I've been reading for a while. I stepped away from it for a moment because it's about this woman who when so this goes from 2017 and then another parallel story in 2001. That's when she was 15 and she had a relationship with her teacher, which obviously is he was a pedophile, but she thinks that she still feels responsible because she wanted it and she knew what was going on because 15 is not that young. You're not a child, you know what is going on. She and anyway, so now in 2017 people are coming out against that guy who was a teacher, like Harvard educated teacher. Um, and with the Me Too movement, kids are coming out and are speaking out about him. And then she's like, no, we were like, she just says that no, it didn't happen. Like, she still thinks that they were in a relationship that she consented to. So it's very complicated because you're in her mind and you're like, what are you doing? You don't understand. And then
Mhm.
she goes to therapy, but she doesn't talk about it because. So it's just like, oh, please, you don't, what are you doing? But it's the being in the head of somebody who's been abused and manipulated so much that they think that they are to blame. It's very difficult to read.
No, it must be. I mean, it already sounds it because the topic is so sensitive in itself.
Yeah, and when this guy like went on and like abused so many other children and oh yeah,
Wow.
very difficult.
I know. You're also writing something that you said that you put away for a while. So what's next for you? Are you finishing that? And you've said you've cut back from 2 books a year to like more one.
Yeah, I don't know. I want to write that this year. I haven't started it yet. I had a draft a couple years ago that I wrote. I had maybe not a whole book, but I had maybe 60,000 words. It was supposed to be 80,000. But when I read it last year, early quarantine, I was like, okay, let's pick this up and finish this, and then I'll go back and edit it. But when I read it with the intention to continue writing it, I had 22 chapters out of 30. I didn't like it. I didn't feel like I connected with the narrator because I was being so safe while writing it, like not wanting to go into things. I was like, okay, I'll talk about it later, so I'll just hint it and then go back. So I just felt like it was lacking heart. I wrote that book with the intention of I just want to write it and get it over with, but now I want to write it with the intention of making it the best book that I've ever written because just giving it everything, like whatever the story deserves versus getting it off my plate. So I just that's how I think about every story, every book, just to get it to the best point that I can and then leave it. And that book was not it. So I'm going to restart it from scratch because it's easier to do versus trying to fix a mess.
Yeah. No, but that's so good to know that you can recognize that and you also go back and say, okay, you know what, this is just not working. And let me, because a lot of times, because people see that you've written 12 books, you've on, this is your 13th one, that for you, it must be very simple. You just start writing, you have a process, you wake up in the morning, you write for 3 hours.
I think in some ways it only gets harder because now you've written about like all things that come naturally to you, you've already written because if you felt like so strongly about something, you've already said it. It's been so many books. And this one is more about it has to take from my life, which I don't usually do. Maybe in this book, these emotions, because there's so many stories, there were some parts that came from me. But usually when I write fiction, it's like a blanket. It's like a security blanket because I can separate myself from them, from the like my reality with these characters, and then nobody will think that it's my story, and it isn't. So that's easy. But now that I'm thinking about talking about myself and my own experiences, it's
That's very close. That's very tough to do also, because you have to also be prepared to, like what this says, to bring down that mirror.
yeah. And then you're thinking about still wanting people to like you. And I feel like any sort of memoir or something like that, if you write anything autobiographical, you have to expose all sides of you. You can't still aim to please, and it's okay if somebody doesn't like you. You're just you. So it's a lot of reckoning.
No, but it sounds like it's an exciting project. So best of luck with that. Any last thoughts before we continue? This was awesome. I learned so much. And especially I loved a couple of the things that if you want to be a writer, just start writing and keep writing. I think, if we keep that in mind, I think it just kind of continues and it grows. And
I
like I
think that's
said,
what I would say because um, you never expect to be an expert at something the first time you do it. But with writing, I don't know why people think that, okay, I'm a genius, nobody else knows it, but once I write it, people will recognize. So they want to be appreciated for just the fact that they wrote the book. But what is in the book? What did you write? And, so and it can't be like my first book wasn't my best book. No, it's very rarely true. And when it is for some authors that their first book is just outshines everything and they never write something as good, it's because they spend years and years thinking about it, developing it in their mind, just the story without even the intention of writing sometimes, just because they've been thinking about these thoughts are right. They're not the first thing that came into their mind. They're not the seeds of a thought. They have thought about these things, they've lived in it, and then they wrote it down. So that's why it's like a right book. um so yeah, I don't burden yourself with the responsibility of having a professional writing career. That's so much. Just take it one step at a time. If you love it so much, do it on the side and sort of slowly build it. um
oh,
it's too
and
much
I would
to.
say, please do pick up a copy of the book because it is very interesting. All the stories will definitely make you think, and it's not thinking in the regular style because it really pushes you to think about what would you do,
Hmm.
in that circumstance. So it's more personal thinking, I think. So the
Hmm.
questions that are asked is like, okay, if this was me, at least that's how I took it, because I think the situations are such that you can relate to most of them.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you. That's a big compliment.
And anything else you'd like to say as we end for today?
No, this was amazing. It was great talking to you. I know that you've read most of the stories, but um,
I still
I
have the
hope.
last two, three to go. So,
Okay. The
because I'm
last,
reading them slowly.
yeah, the last one is the one that makes me cry every
Okay, so I'm
single.
going to read that one today and I will write you back on Instagram or on email.
Sounds good. Thank
Awesome.
you so
Thank
much.
you.